Let me begin this morning by thanking the leadership of our very own American Legion Post and all the selfless volunteers who've worked so hard to make today's events a success. I think we all owe them a round of applause. Thank you. The opportunity to share remarks and recognize those who serve this nation is one of the great privileges that comes with the job of being mayor of our city. And it is an honor to be with you all this morning. As many of you may recall, in past years, I've talked about the courage and commitment displayed by two individual soldiers who served with distinction in the First Great War. This morning, I wish to share a story from the Second Great War, a story that comes from Stephen Ambrose's book, The Wild Blue. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, an idealistic young man from South Dakota felt compelled to serve a cause greater than himself. And like millions of other young Americans, he volunteered to serve his country in a time of war. He eventually became the pilot of a B-24 Liberator. And on one particular mission, a mechanical malfunction caused the type of problem most pilots dread. A bomb was released by accident. The crew watched in horror as the weapon descended in a remote area of Austria, perfectly destroying a small farm, decimating the house, the barn, and the water tank. Given the time of day, high noon, the crew knew that the inhabitants had most likely gathered for their midday meal. Later that day, back at the base, that young pilot received a cable from his wife that she had given birth to the couple's first child, a perfectly beautiful baby girl. Of course, the pilot was ecstatic, but the accident haunted him. He said that he and his wife, and I quote, "brought a new child into the world today, and I probably killed someone else's right at lunchtime. Hell, why did that bomb have to hit there?" End of quote. The pilot carried around the pain and burden of this incident for decades. Now, many of you may recall the name, or recognize the name, That young pilot was George S. McGovern, a great statesman serving as a United States congressman, senator, and presidential candidate. Interestingly enough, he was most famous for his strident opposition to the Vietnam War. Now, like many who returned from the skies of Europe, the beaches of Normandy, and the seas of the South Pacific, he didn't brag or boast about his service. Just as President George W. Bush said of this greatest generation, and I quote, "They put their medals in drawers, went to work, and built on a historic scale highways and universities, suburbs and factories, great cities and grand alliances, the strong foundation of an American century." End of quote. George McGovern was fortunate to come home, but there were thousands who helped liberate Europe and half of Asia who never returned. More than 45 years later, in 1985, the then retired McGovern participated in a documentary on World War II, and he spoke candidly about the accidental bombing. An Austrian farmer saw that documentary and knew that the incident McGovern described was in fact his own farm. He contacted the documentarians and asked that they reach out to McGovern and let him know that the family saw the bomber coming and that no one was harmed. And I'm quoting the farmer now. "I want you to tell him that no matter what other Austrians think, I despised Adolf Hitler. And because of our attitude, I thought at the time that if the bombing of our farm reduced the length of that war by 1 hour or 1 minute, it was well worth it." Well, as was true in the 1940s, the world is an uncertain and precarious place, and it desperately needs our leadership, and it needs our resolve. The American way is to work for a more just and sane planet, a safer world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity, and there are opportunities for every one of God's children. We hope for a brighter future, and realize that it cannot be secured without sacrifice and without a deep understanding that we all have a responsibility to one another. It's imperative that we remember all those who were lost in combat and those who are no longer with us. Of equal importance, we must remember, support, and care for all those who sacrificed for something greater than themselves. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. God bless you. May God bless our servicemen and women, active and retired, those no longer with us, and all those who keep us safe. And may God bless America. Thank you all.